Today I want to talk about DEI, specifically my experience with it in the world of comedy writing, stand-up, corporate world, multimedia, creative stuff. And in this episode I want to cover kind of the damage that it's done in my life and why it's forced me to basically opt out of everything. I don't think that's an exaggeration. I've taken on an identity of opting out. Whatever the mainstream is, I have to do my own thing. Don't have to. I think there's a way I could walk the line, and I'll get into that. But just in terms of morale, not being demoralized, not walking on eggshells, I've chosen to go independent with almost everything in my life, from work to creative ventures to relationships, and just in general to my own identity, not as a member of a group or a subculture, which was very motivating for me, and not really finding a place in the world because, frankly, I've been told in no uncertain terms that I'm in the way. I'm taking somebody else's place. People are tired of it. Tired of white guys. Ironically, I'm not entirely white, but I don't have to get into that. My dad, Native American ancestry. But when you appear white in this era, you get a certain feedback. And ironically, when I've watched movies about, racist antebellum South, you watch The Green Mile, Remember the Titans. I was steeped in this stuff growing up. Hey, buddy. And I also went to a mostly black high school, lived in Baltimore. So, and on my dad's side, he showed me a yearbook where he was called the N-word. He made it very clear that we don't treat anyone differently based on the color of their skin. And actually, we are kind of people who get along with everybody. I've lived in all black neighborhoods. I've lived in all gay neighborhoods. I've lived in all Armenian neighborhoods. I lived in a house with 15 Chinese immigrants who didn't speak English. I made it a point to not be identified with my skin tone, with my background, my heritage, anything, not even nationalism. I remember growing up as a millennial, it meant nothing to be an American, really. I will say this, if there's a privilege to being white, it's that you don't get associated with one identity group. Being white doesn't mean that much in this day and age. Being American didn't mean that much. So I was sort of a free agent, and I enjoyed that. And I certainly didn't have any prejudices against any group. And I took some pride in the fact that my friend group looked like a Benetton ad. These sort of Disney-fied friend groups where you've got somebody in a wheelchair, and then there's a black guy, and then there's a gay, opera singer, and just whatever you can imagine. That's kind of what my life looked like. So coming up, I thought, man, we just elected Obama. We're really doing this. I mean, look at my friends. Look at us. And it's all based on who we are and our character. What Martin Luther King said. We're getting along because of our character and our sense of humor and our shared history, and we're ignoring a lot of that stuff. So I would say I was supremely naive going into my adult life. I thought, one thing I am is a writer, a comedian, a creative person, and I've found ways to use that. I'm a performer. I'm gonna go for that, and I'm gonna do it in a way that lives up to my unique family history, my unique friendships, my unique selections of reading, philosophy and old writers, and gonzo journalism was a big motivation for me. Hunter Thompson, Tom Wolfe, the sort of new journalism. I had all these weird inputs that I'm like, I don't see this everywhere. This makes a nice goulash of identity that I really want to share. And I believed in meritocracy, so eventually I started making videos. I learned more about making videos. And I said, wow, I can do this and put this on YouTube. So I got really into that. Then I found stand-up, and I go, wow, there's this open mic scene. I can go to all these different open mics, most of which were not white. They were black. They were female run. There was all sorts of stuff happening in Baltimore and DC. And, I can stand out based on the merit of my jokes. And sometimes the audience doesn't want to hear it, but there was this feeling you'd get going up of, I'm going to impose, even if the audience is against me, I'm going to impose my talent. I'm going to overcome this. It's like you're in the fourth quarter, losing in a game, and you go, we're going to overcome this. We're going to impose a win on this bad situation. And that's kind of what stand-up feels like. You're on the side, like pumping yourself up, like I'm going to show them. And you could do that, where I was from at that time. This would have been, around 2014. And I think a lot of people rightly point out that that's kind of when things started to shift. There was a shift in 2013 and there was a shift in 2020. And we're going to be figuring out what those shifts meant for a long time. But having lived through it, I can attest to what it felt like when suddenly I'd be talking about something with a white bisexual, workmate, let's say about police brutality, and sharing my experience with police overreach in my life. And to have a white bisexual girl say, hey, maybe don't talk about that because you're white and that's a black issue. Okay. Doesn't that just support it? Whatever. Ignore it. I'm very liberal. I'll ignore this. And then to get a job at a company that I literally worked for free for a long period of time. I was always finding like alternative routes into companies or into opportunities with stand-up. It's like, I'll make my own opportunity. So to build that up over years and get a position that I had rightly earned, and then to have a black older woman, a teacher, come to me and say, oh, you got that position? Figures. Really, you? Oh, great. Like clearly rolling her eyes like another white guy, great. And to be a young person and to go, why are you looking at me that way instead of looking at me as a young person who showed initiative and worked really hard and got something? Why can't you be happy for me just because of the color of my skin? You notice these things, but you're told all the time, ignore that. You're privileged. You get everything you want. Stop talking about the things that don't fit that narrative. Stop talking about the things that are difficult for you. Suck it up. You're a white guy. No one's ever going to feel sorry for you. Okay, fair enough. Then I move out to Los Angeles, and it's like, I'm going to go after this documentary, video, stand-up thing in a bigger pond. I'm going to really give it my all. I've got tons of experience. I've been on stage all, over the world, hundreds of shows, thousands of people. I've made, so many videos at this point, hundreds and hundreds of videos. I've taught, I've explored, I've gone to areas and found stories in dangerous areas. I'm living up to this romantic image of what it means to be a young artist and a creator. I'm going to go take that to LA. And then just over and over and over again to hear, oh, great, another white guy. Stop and think about that for a minute. What that feels like to be a peer and for somebody to look at you and go, white guy, great, get to the back, or we don't want you. I mean, I'm not saying this was said subtly. I'm saying this was said overtly. We don't need any more white guys. We don't want a white guy. We want a woman. We want a minority. Okay, there's plenty of those. Like, we live in a multicultural society. I've been on shows where I'm the only white guy. What are you talking about? Why are we talking about this so much? Why is the host of the show saying, great, another white guy, just because this show happened to have a few white guys? White guys invented stand-up. Like, that makes sense. White guys invented shows like SNL, you know? Maybe there's a reason for that. Would I go into the NFL and say, oh, great, another black guy? Would I go into a kindergarten and say, another woman, really? Because that's how absurd it is. But that was happening, and it was overt, and it was celebrated. I think I would have to go back pretty far into history to find a time when a black man who was talented, who earned his keep, and you can tell in entertainment who's talented because literally, like, the audience will come up to you and they'll say, you did the best tonight. You had the best set. There's sort of a meritocracy. That's what drew me to it. But I'd have to go back pretty far to find a time when people were saying, sorry about this, another black guy, or we don't want any black guys or any more black guys in this show. I know it's happened, I'm sure, but I'd have to go back pretty far. And I don't know how far I'd have to go back to find a time when that was happening routinely, like often on a weekly basis. You would hear something like this as a white guy. I'd have to go back pretty far to find a time when it was that overt. And also, as that black person, you couldn't even say, hey, this isn't fair. This is discrimination. Because that's what you faced as a white person, as a white guy specifically. If you said, hey, this is not fair to judge me based on the color of my skin. I'm worked here. I'm a peer. I deserve to be judged by the quality of my work. You would be called a racist for saying that. You're the racist one for saying, hey, maybe don't say, don't be a white guy to my face. That's incredibly demoralizing. And I've never, ever used whiteness to get an advantage. Every single time I can think of it, that was a disadvantage. That was something I had to kind of overcome. It was like, my mentor loves the work I'm doing for them, but they're like, I got to get this by HR that you're white. It was always a problem. I met white women who would say things like, I wish I were born black. Like, in a deep-rooted way, they were sensing that they just weren't wanted. They wanted to be something other. And I totally related to that. I mean, at my high school, it's like all the white guys wanted to be black. We called them wiggers. And it was kind of like an embarrassing thing to get cornrows and to dress a certain way to try to fit in with the black culture. But the reason it was awkward is because it's like, you never will. No matter how, there's a lot of movies about this. Like, the white guy gets so far. Eminem's whole career is about this. You get so far in that world, but you'll always be a white guy. There'll be a few people who'll be like, okay, you get a black pass. You're one of us now. But even in a case like Eminem, like, you'll never really be part of that community. So I think a lot of young people like me face that dilemma of, I just want to be a part of the community, whether it's white, black, whatever it is. I want to be a part of this community, and then being told over and over again, you never will, and there's nothing you can do to change that, and it's your fault, or it's your ancestors' fault, or your parents' fault. Even though my dad's not even completely white, it's their fault, so you shouldn't even feel bad that this is happening to you. It's just like, go away. It's just step back, listen. But that's what I would do. It's like, hey, shush. I'd step back and say, okay, I'll make my own YouTube videos. I'll make my own comedy show. I'll start my own business. I mean, it's a message for a different video, but part of DEI is also the gender war. I'll step out of dating or hanging out in feminist circles because women are going after me for being a man. there were other comedy shows. I can think of one comedy show in particular where I was performing week after week and having amazing sets and bringing huge numbers of audience. If you know the comedy world, you know that like bringing an audience is one of the greatest capitals you can have. And I one show in particular, I brought like half the audience. Everyone I knew, I brought them out. And the hosts of the show were two guys and a girl. And she kind of played the guitar and she was trying, but, you know, she wasn't funny. She was sort of like depressed looking and trying different things. And I would encourage her. I'd say, yeah, keep trying that guitar. That was funny, that bit you did. But, you know, she's like a depressed girl and she doesn't seem very happy, especially when men around her are getting attention. I can only imagine what kind of narrative she has around that. Like, of course they like looking at the men. No, they don't. Like, people don't want it. We have to overcome that. They're tired of seeing men. You got to be really funny to win the audience over. They want you, a woman, to succeed. Trust me. Not that I would say this to her, but I would encourage her to say, yeah, that was great. Keep going. And I saw her envy started to build over these shows. I'm like, all I'm doing is making you money, bringing audience, and doing a good set. Like, from a teamwork perspective, meritocratic, you know, if you're a member of a team, you just go, I just want to make goals for my team, play well, you know, and support the team by bringing audience out, having people buy merchandise, whatever. Like, you just find ways, how can I support this team effort? That's all I was doing. And in many situations, it's like, let me try not only to do all the things that are a good job, but let me try to do the best job at doing a good job. Like, let me try to stand out by bringing the most audience, by having the best set. That's what a meritocracy is supposed to be. And that just made her envious. And you can see it. It's very subtle, you know, these things I'm talking about. You know, black people or women might call it microaggressions. It is. It's like subtle, I hate you, even though you're trying to be nice and do everything you can for me. I hate you more. Oh, shut up. And so this girl, over time, we had this big show and it went so well. I was so happy. I was talking to my friends and they called it, let me give you the scenario of how she sabotaged me. They called it the sexy show. We're like, and the host was kind of like a nerdy guy, so it was funny that he was like, we're the sexy show and we're being sexy up here. We're so sexy. You guys find us so sexy. That was the joke, right? So throughout the show, he's saying, you know, this is blah, blah, blah. Isn't she sexy? You guys think she's so sexy? That was their joke, right? So after the show, and by the way, I've talked to her many times. We're cool. Everything's fine. But I went, you guys did great. Audience loved you. They thought you were so sexy. She goes, what? What are you saying? And I go, oh, I immediately recognized it, right? Because you like get used to this stuff. I go, no. I was just calling back to what you guys said on stage. You know, that you guys were joking about how sexy you were. I'm not saying that. I'm just calling back to like what you said. And she goes, what are you talking? Like, this is making me uncomfortable. And I'm like, guys, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? The whole show is the sexy show. That's what I'm referring to. Sorry if there's a misunderstanding. Want to be clear. Wasn't meaning to do that. Just calling back to what you said on stage. And I came back later to apologize, and she screams, get away, I don't want to talk to you. And this guy messages me later saying, hey, man, we can't have you anymore. Sorry, there's nothing we can do. I'm like, you saw that situation. I have 10 witnesses. If I'm in trouble for that, you should be in trouble for making that the whole joke of your show. You saw it. Like, what is going on here? I've done nothing but, you know, be a good sport with your venture here. And he says, I know, man, but that's the way she feels. There's nothing I can do. Moments like this, when you see the animosity, when you see, you know, I don't know if I call it hatred. Sometimes it's envy. It's all sorts of things, but it's an excuse they have to go after men or after white men. And no matter how good you can do, you can't beat it. You can't win this game. It's moments like this that I had to step away from something I love and go, even if it's just one person who does that in a group, it's enough to get you cut. And maybe even like criminal allegations. I mean, if this woman's willing to exaggerate and lie about this, for who knows why. I've been nothing but nice to her. What's she going to do if she deems me not nice, or I'm even more successful? It just was so fraught that I had to step back and quit my passion, something I loved. During the pandemic, when it went away, I never came back. And I just got feeling like I was safer and safer doing things on my own. And you can imagine, like, I go to a party and a similar thing with a feminist girl would happen. You'd say something that's completely vanilla. I was at a wedding and I said, who's going to catch the bouquet? Is it you? And she's like, well, who would I marry? You? And I'm like, maybe. That was a literal interaction that I had with somebody who later decided that made her feel uncomfortable. And I've got a bunch of guys telling me to apologize, and it gets heated. And so guess what I did? Never saw that group again, even though one of them was my best friend. And I was like filming his wedding, Yeah, that's what you have to do as a white guy. You have to be willing, there's a quote in Heat where he says, you got to be willing to drop everything and skip town when the heat is on. That's literally what you have to do as a white guy. You smell that, you go, okay, they're making shit up, they're spreading gossip, and there's always an undertone of, they might not call you racist. Some of them, that girl in particular, or another girl called me a misogynist, I think. It doesn't matter. Even if it's just, I don't feel right, there's always like an undertone of you did something so wrong to make them feel that way. I don't know how to place it. It's like, even if you can clearly demonstrate that actually by your own logic, you made me uncomfortable. Because that girl, you're the one who said, should I marry you? That made me uncomfortable. You sexually harassed me. I could just flip it on them with their same logic, but it's not how we observe people. We don't see white guys as ever deserving that kind of equal consideration. And we always see women and minorities as victimized, even if they're victimizing in the same way they're claiming to be victimized. When you look at that, and all of this I could lump under DEI, because losing the friend group is one thing, but when it comes to my craft and workplace stuff, like, that's my passion in life, and you're taking that away. And there's no winning. So when I realized that, I'm very lucky that I didn't go further. And, some of these nefarious, manipulative characters are envious or just downright like, we don't want you because of your skin color, what you represent to me. I don't want you to talk right now. I don't want you to be at this job because of what you represent to me. Not as an individual who's been kind to me and who I know, but as your group identity based on stuff you can't change. To have black guys tell me like, yeah, we don't want white guys. It's like, man, you grew up in Southern California. How many black friends do you have? I went to an all-black school. I'm blacker than you. Shut the fuck up. Like, gay guys never give me this because everybody I know is gay and we're all cool and actually gay guys are pretty like based about some of these matters. But yeah, like if you say like, oh, you're not supporting, LGBT, it's like, how many times do you get dinner with a gay person? Like, let's just put it on the table. Like, are you actually a part of these groups you claim to support? Because I am. That's my story. That's my history. And I've been pushed more and more and more away from that, just in the off chance that I might lose a job, I might end up in HR, or I might just never be able to be myself because I'm worried how somebody's going to purposefully misinterpret it. Not even always for their own gain. Sometimes it is. But sometimes it's just a destructive impulse. Like, you've been told your whole life to hate these white guys. It's like a sandcastle you just want to kick over. I see a lot of young women like, I went on a date with this guy who was rich and thought he was all of that, and I called his employer and got him fired or something. It's like, do you just grow up wanting to like destroy a white man? Like, that's in the air right now. And when you are viewed as that guy, as that enemy, I can't overemphasize how much you have to step out of all of society, like pretty much all of it, and do everything individual client to client, individual person to person, really have your walls up, take things really slow, and for the most part, be a company of one and a creator of one. And that's why I'm making this video right now, because some part of me wants to create. I have to work a lot to get my opportunities. I'm in no way privileged. As I'll talk about on this channel, you know, there's periods where I'm sleeping in a van or an RV. I'm doing whatever it takes to invest, you know, 50, 60% of my income so I can have my own opportunity, create my own business, my own documentary, whatever it is, my own family. And I'm fine with that, but I want to identify the problem here, because I think if we don't admit we have a problem, there's nothing we can do about it. And this affects, obviously, white people and white men in general, but it also affects those companies and those industries. Like television and movies and comedy is going downhill like crazy. You know, there's one statistic about how vast majority of comedy writers and showrunners were white men, and now it's like, you know, a few percentage points above 10, like 13, 14, 15%. So what does that do when you take the most talented pool of people and you say, we're not hiring any more of those? What would happen if we did that with Asians in math, or black people in sports and music, or women in nursing? You know, you can't do that just because of some animosity you have towards that entire group. You can't just say no more white guys. It affects these industries. I haven't seen a funny comedy in like 10 years except for Tim Robinson, a white guy. He's making some really weird, interesting stuff. So that's why you're seeing a lot of people move to podcasts. They're going to be creating their own studios, even creating their own YouTubes and networks when they get banned on them. Because even when you go independent, they come after you and try to pull your channel and say you're not allowed to say this stuff. And you're just pushing, like, I never wanted to be here. I wanted to be an ally my whole life. Like I said, I wanted that Benetton group where we all got along because of who we are. That was who I was. Identified as very liberal. All of that, my allyship, what I could have brought to them in terms of numbers and talent and ability and work, has been destroyed. Like, I've been pushed out of that. And that's just not just going to affect me. I'll be fine. But that affects those institutions that choose identity over merit. And we're seeing them crumble. So here I am, starting over. This is the devolution, because we devolved to the beginning. And we're going to start over, learn how to do this as an individual. Trust God. Trust my virtues like truth, art, exploration, philosophy, true journalism, telling the real story, vulnerability, things I use in my day-to-day life to have amazing relationships. It's not that my life is bad. It's that I've been forced to start over and build my own thing. And I hope people watching this, if you resonated with this message, you know, subscribe, because I'm going to go over a lot of the ways that I have been able to avoid the gatekeeping system. So I want to give tips and tricks on how to build a life around that. And I think that will slowly change the culture. So thank you all for watching. Have a great day. There's hope at the end of the tunnel, but let's be real about what's going on now so we can fix it.